For me, my final straw was the first time I knew I had what I now know as a blackout, where I had a family party for my son, and all my family came, my brothers, their kids, and I didn't want to be drunk at my son's party. I wasn't going to drink at his party. I promised myself that. The party hasn't started yet. I'm setting up the bar. No one's here. I'm not going to drink his party, but I can have a couple drinks now before the party. And then every time I'd fix a drink, I'd drink some myself, and I got very drunk. But the next morning I woke up, I remembered nothing. I wanted to stop drinking. There were times I didn't, for sure. But as time went on, I truly wanted to stop drinking. And I promised people I'd stop drinking, and I meant it. And I tried, and I could not.
Until
I decided to give up drinking in the month of February
Mhm.
because it's the shortest month. And it's a lot shorter than Lent. I thought I could do that. Pretty logical, right? And the first year I did it. I went all month without drinking. I couldn't wait until March 1 came, but I went all month without drinking.
Before deciding to completely stop, did you ever consider reducing and just having it in a safer container or just being a lot more controlled? But I
Of
know with
course.
addiction,
Of
tell us
course.
more about that.
I tried it every day. Today
Mhm.
I'll just drink two. And I used to think I had a life cycle in my basement, and I thought, well, if I can get up in the morning and pound the life cycle and go really hard, then I don't have a problem. Now, that's kind of insane thinking. It's also probably not very safe when I'm hungover to get on a bike and push myself too hard. But I had all these weird ways of trying to say I don't have a problem. But I did try to control it, and that's not possible for someone who struggles with an addiction to alcohol. And I proved that to myself. And that's when I decided I really do have a problem that I can't solve on my own.
If you are new to the Charlène Gisèle show, welcome. And if you are one of our loyal listeners and tune in every Wednesday, I just really want to say thank you. I would love to ask you for a quick favor. If you love the show, please do make sure that you subscribe and follow so that you can get notification on Wednesday. And also, please do leave us a review, a rating. It means so much and helps us have the best conversations with the best guest every week. Thank you.
Gary, welcome to the Charlène Gisèle show. I'm so excited to have this conversation. And before we get started, I also really wanted to take a moment to really acknowledge your courage today, because I know we're going to dive into a very personal topic. So for that, I thank you.
Well, thank you, Charlene. I'm happy to be here and happy to be open and transparent with your audience. I think it's important.
Gary, could you start off by giving us a bit of your background? I know you've been in practice of law for over 45 years, coming 46 years. Can you tell us some of the pivotal moments in your journey vis-a-vis your health, your performance, and how did that all come about?
Yeah, so I have been practicing 45 years. I've done litigation my whole career. I switched after about 30 years of doing high-level insurance defense work to doing family law. The first major transition I had in my life is I struggle with the disease of alcoholism. I practiced law for 12 years as an active alcoholic, and I've been in recovery since 1991. And it was truly transformational in how I saw myself, how I interacted with people, the thoughts I had, the mindset I had. I was mostly characterized by incredible fear when I was drinking. I was afraid of things that weren't even scary. It was irrational, and transitioned through that, and I have changed. And it allowed me to be much more present and focused when I was working, and really to be a better service to my clients.
Can we just go a few steps back into your
Sure.
journey? Gary, how did it all start, if I can ask?
How did it all start? For me, it was a process, not an event. I lived at home in college and in law school, so I didn't have the opportunities to drink daily. When I drank, it was often a situation where I would get completely intoxicated. There was seldom having a drink or two. When I got married in law school and moved out on my own, I would drink daily with dinner. And at some point, it transitioned to where it wasn't a choice, but it was something I had to do. And it wasn't having a drink or two, but having many more. And instead of choosing to have a drink or two, I'd say I'm only going to have 2 drinks, but I wouldn't stop. Or I'd say I'm not going to drink tonight, and I would. I really lost the power of choice over my drinking. And it became something that was just a 24/7 thing of waking up hungover, of debating if I'm going to drink today or not, and then how can I get away with it, and starting to drink and getting drunk and passing out. It became a daily routine.
And when you started to have this drinking habit, was it a coping mechanism? Was it triggered by stress? Did you notice that you drank more when you were stressed, or did you drink more when you were celebrating? Because I know that for different people, there are different triggers, right?
I think there are a lot of triggers for a lot of people. There's no doubt that stress can cause people to drink as an escape mechanism. We have a very high level of problem drinking in the legal profession, much higher than is statistically the case in other fields. But to be completely honest, for me, it wasn't a matter of trigger. I would drink when it was sunny out. I drink when it was raining. I drink when I was happy. I drink when I was sad. It was for me an addiction. And I don't think I actually started drinking to escape anything. My own thought is, and I don't know, that I was born an alcoholic and it developed. And honestly, for in comparison to some lawyers, I worked in a small firm. My world wasn't as pressured. I worked with some incredible partners. I was blessed to have a fairly stress-free work environment. Of course, I got sober in 1991. When I started practicing law, we didn't even have computers, so much less emails and texting. So the practice law was a bit slower, a bit more gentle, a bit more less rushed and less pressured. And I know today's people can say a nasty email to someone saying something they would never say if they saw them face to face. And so there was more professional courtesy then. I had stresses, but I don't think those stresses were why I in particular drink. It's my experience, because this is a big focus of who I am and what I do, and helping people to avoid that I do think stress leads to a lot of problem drinking. I chaired the lawyer assistance program in my area, Maryland, for about 20 years. And I know for many lawyers, stress causes them to drink more than they want to.
And Gary, could you perhaps walk us through the hallmarks of addiction, at least as you've experienced it? If somebody's listening and thinking, "Oh, I don't know, what's my relationship status with alcohol? I drink quite a lot, but am I addicted?" How would one know?
Well, it's a very personal, to me, it's a very personal decision as to whether you consider yourself to be an alcoholic or to have some other addiction. Some of the hallmarks to me are secrecy, drinking secretly, which I certainly did, lying about my drinking, hiding my drinking. But the most important one is how many of the problems that I experienced in my life, how many of the times did I do something I wasn't proud of or happy with, happened when I was drinking or drunk versus not. And if most of the problems in my life were caused when I'm drinking, then maybe I'm suffering from an addiction to alcohol. And to me, the key for me is when I drink and I don't want to, or I drink more than I want to, and I'm unable to stop even when inside I want to, then I probably need some help. And that was my experience. I wanted to stop drinking. There were times I didn't, for sure. But as time went on, I truly wanted to stop drinking. And I promised people I'd stop drinking, and I meant it. And I tried, and I could not. I could not.
Until
My last, well, if I could share one thing that to me shows the progression of my addiction. I decided to give up drinking in the month of February because it's the shortest month. And it's a lot shorter than Lent. I thought I could do that. Pretty logical, right? And the first year I did it. I went all month without drinking. I couldn't wait until March 1 came, but I went all month without drinking. So next year I decided to do it again to prove to my family and to me I did not have an addiction. And the second time I did it, I got halfway through the month instead of all the way through the month. But what happened then was I didn't fail. I went underground. I drank the rest of the month and never got caught. And I drink, hide it, act like I'm sober, and get drunk the rest of the month. And the third year came, I wanted to make the same promise, but I knew I couldn't do it. I couldn't make it a single day. But I promised my family, oh, I'm not going to drink this month. But it started off on a lie. I knew that I couldn't do it. It was a matter of how I could appear to not be drinking, but actually drink every day. And to me, that shows over the course of those three different efforts, the progression. For me, my final straw, and for everybody, that's very unique what the final thing. But for me, my final thing was the first time I knew I had what I now know as a blackout, where I had a family party for my son, and all my family came, my brothers, their kids, and I didn't want to be drunk at my son's party. I wasn't going to drink at his party. I promised myself that. The party hasn't started yet. I'm setting up the bar. No one's here. I'm not going to drink his party, but I can have a couple of drinks now before the party. Of course, it didn't work out like that. And then every time I'd fix a drink, I'd drink some myself, and I got very drunk. And I had a long, long conversation with my niece, who was 15. Private, personal, confidential, intimate discussion. I remember right where I was standing, but the next morning I woke up, I remembered nothing of our conversation. And when my then wife asked me what we talked about, I couldn't remember it. I couldn't hide the fact. I couldn't excuse away. As brilliant as I am, as persuasive, I couldn't explain how I couldn't remember what we talked about. And that scared me. As a lawyer, I depend on my brain for what I do successfully. The thought that I couldn't remember an hour-long conversation from the night before was really scary. And that's when I was stuck at this place of knowing I couldn't go on drinking, but at the same time knowing I could not stop drinking because I had tried it. And it was a terrible, terrible place to be where I just felt so stuck.
Mm. Do you think that very often we normalize or over indulge in alcohol as a sort of social thing that we do, and it's almost promoted as well, in networking? There is drinking, when you close a deal, you go to drink, there is a lunch, you drink. What do you think about that?
I think that is the case. I think drinking has, and it's probably even more true years gone by, but it's still true today. All the bar association functions are focused around drinking, happy hours, open bars, things of that nature. And it is a drinking culture where drinking is very normalized. And that's kind of how I was growing up too. Drinking was a social courtesy. Charlene, when you came to your house, I took your coat, I hung out of my closet. What would you like to drink, Charlene? And as soon as
Yeah.
your drink was partly done, halfway done, can I freshen it up for you? You're not even finished yet. Can I freshen it up for you?
Yeah.
And it was something we were supposed to do. And I do think that it's a social, not necessity, but event that happens all too much. And I've learned now that I don't drink, alcohol really has no power over me. I don't need to drink. I don't want to drink. If I were to be with you and your fiance having a dinner with me and my wife, I wouldn't even be. If you had a glass of wine and he had a drink, I wouldn't care. It wouldn't matter to me at all
So you
because
can be around it and be
oh,
comfortable.
always completely comfort because I don't have any interest. It has no power over me now.
And how long did that take between stopping to drink and being able to socialize in an environment where others are drinking and you're not? How long did that take?
For me, it probably happened in my first year of recovery. And it wasn't, again, like an event, like I could point to this date, but it's a process where once I fully surrendered to the fact that I couldn't drink alcohol successfully. Once in my heart, I accepted that. I think that compulsion to drink was lifted. If I was allergic to strawberries, where if I ate a strawberry, I'd not be able to breathe, I'd break out in hives, I'd have to get a shot with an EpiPen, I wouldn't be interested in having a strawberry. I wouldn't. And I got to the point that way with alcohol when I realized and really surrendered to what it did to me. Then I realized I'm not that interested. And one of my fears was I didn't know what to do when I wasn't drinking because I did everything drinking. But I realized I can do everything else and have so much more fun and be better at it and enjoy it more and remember it and laugh about the whole evening.
Did you ever consider, before deciding to completely stop, did you ever consider reducing and just having it in a safer container, or just being a lot more controlled about? I
Of
know with
course.
addiction.
Of
Tell us
course.
more
I
about
tried it.
that.
I tried it every day. Today I'll just drink two. And I used to think I had a life cycle in my basement, and I thought, well, if I can get up in the morning and pound the life cycle and go really hard, then I don't have a problem. Now, that's kind of insane thinking. It's also probably not very safe when I'm hungover to get on a bike and push myself too hard. But I had all these weird ways of trying to say I don't have a problem. But I did try to control it, and that's not possible for someone who struggles with an addiction to alcohol. And I proved that to myself. And that's when I decided I really do have a problem that I can't solve on my own.
Mm. Do you think there is any way that someone can establish their own threshold? I know it's a very personal journey, but if we're not just waiting for the catastrophic event and we're just looking at the process, and somebody is listening and does drink perhaps every night, right? It's become a ritual. They come back from work and they have 2-3 glasses, maybe not crazy quantities, but just consistently every time. Or they go to that drink after a stressful day, and they realize that over the years it's become a habit, and that if they don't have the drink around, then they start to miss it and to look for it. When would one want to start thinking about their relationship with alcohol?
Well, I think that if we think we're drinking too much and we want to change it, then we can try to change it. And if I think I'm eating too many brownies at night and it's not healthy for me, I could choose to not have a brownie and ice cream before I go to bed. But if we find that we want to change our relationship with alcohol and we cannot, then that's, I think, an indication that maybe we should reach out to someone outside. For example, something like the lawyer assistance program, or if you're at a place where they have an employee assistance program, reach out to someone for support and assistance. If it's something that you cannot achieve on your own, what you want, if you want to have one glass of wine a night instead of 3, and you're unable to do that consistently, then maybe reach out to someone outside who's an expert in the field who can give you some guidance and support.
And what if you suddenly have a behavior that you don't really recognize? I'm thinking about a pattern that I've come to be familiar with in my line of work, which is typically we only drink at night, for example. So let's take a no-name basis case study. Let's call that person John, right? So John only drinks at night, but one day after many years of drinking consistently at night, he wakes up and he has a court hearing and he feels really, really anxious. And actually, that morning, he pours himself a glass of champagne that was left over from last night and finds that that takes the edge off. And so the next day, he has another hearing and he thinks, well, that worked yesterday. So instead of coffee, let me have champagne for breakfast. What would be worth John knowing at this point?
When we crossed that line we had set for ourselves, that I only drink at night and I don't drink in the morning, or I only drink at home and I don't drink at the office, as we go down in our addiction, that we keep moving the goalposts. We keep moving that red line that we're never going to cross with an excuse. That glass of champagne made me feel better. It's okay. But we should remember what that red line was that we set. And if we start to cross that one and set a new one and cross that one, I'm only going to have one glass of champagne in the morning. But then we're stopping the way to work to pick up something more. Well, then maybe that's a red flag, that maybe it's time to talk to someone who is an expert in addiction and recovery about what that pattern looks like, and do I need some support?
But then there is the denial phase, right, Gary? And that's a really tough phase, because there is a part of us that feels ashamed or embarrassed to even confront the reality of our behavior. Can you tell us a little bit more about that shame or that feeling, and how hard it can be to confront that reality?
Yeah, I was filled with shame and guilt and remorse, and it is true. And to me, addiction really is a disease of denial. Everyone around us sees it before we do, and that's why you asked me what kind of my last straw was, and I shared that earlier. I think in the absence of that particular event, I wouldn't have made a choice to go in a different direction than I did. And we need something to help us break through that denial, something that getting in an accident when we're drinking, getting fired from work, having a problem at home, something to help break through that denial and say, hey, now this is unacceptable to me. This is affecting my life in a way that's profound and powerful that I don't want to experience. And that's why I was at that place where I couldn't imagine my life still drinking, but I couldn't imagine my life not drinking either. And you get to that point and you say, now I need some help because I don't know how to move forward from here.
You know what I find really interesting, Gary, and I would love your insights on that, is that very often we push away people that flag our behaviors, right? So I'm just assuming that in your history, you would have had a lot of very loving, caring people that noticed the pattern, right? And what did you do?
For me, it wasn't really as much of an issue as for some, because my wife at the time, I was maybe pretty good at how I hit it, and it wasn't really a problem for us. My parents, my dad was in recovery then, my mom was in Al-Anon, and I know they noticed it, but they actually did the right thing, which is not to tell me don't drink, because it never ever works. It
Mm.
just makes the alcoholic angrier, and I'll show you. But what your suggestion was, that those who flag it for us are often responded to with anger or retaliation, and that's true. And that's why it's not really helpful to tell someone not to drink. It never really seems to work from my experience.
Mm.
It's counterproductive. What I think works better is to let the person suffer the natural consequences of their own behaviors, whatever that might be.
Mm. I would love to actually talk about that a little bit more, and just since you mentioned this boundaries and how you keep crossing the line. And I think you gave such a great example of, for example, I only drink at home and I don't drink in the office, or I only drink at night and I don't drink in the morning. Can you maybe give us a bit of a map of when you crossed your own boundaries before you made that courageous decision to stop? Like, how did that boundary crossing work for you, and what were some of the behaviors and action where you thought, oh, okay, I've definitely crossed the line?
Well, certainly one of them was that last February when I made a promise that I was not going to drink that
Mm.
whole month, knowing that I was going to try to find a way to drink every day and not get caught. Such a lie, such deception, such secrecy. And certainly every day I cross the red line because I'm saying tonight I'm not going to drink, or I'm only going to have one or two, and I'd have many more. But
Mm.
particularly the last night when I made such a promise that I wasn't going to drink at my son's family birthday party. And not only did I drink, but I got drunk and had a blackout. And that was not a red line that I set because I didn't know really at the time there was such a thing. And maybe it happened to me before, but I could explain it. Well, I didn't hear what Charlene said, or I don't remember. I wasn't paying attention. But this was too profound. I could not excuse it. And it was not a red line that I had set and said, don't cross, don't have a blackout. But it was so powerful that it couldn't be ignored.
And you know what I found fascinating, Gary, about our past and our personalities and this conversation right now is I'm reflecting on my own addictions, and I'm a former workaholic. And as you were talking about your blackout, I've never experienced that with alcohol, but I've blacked out from work. I've actually blacked out after 2 back-to-back all-nighters, and I just hadn't slept at all. I was so anxious, and I left the office and I got into the taxi and I literally blacked out. I had no substance in me. But my body, my brain completely gave up. I didn't know where I was. I actually just, lost that moment where you faint and you just don't know where you are. And it made me realize how addicted I was to work that I wouldn't even look after my basic fundamental self-care needs, water, nutrition, sleep, rest, recovery. I ignored all of that and I just kept fueling myself with my substance of choice, which was work, 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 and I could never get enough.
Yeah, that's how it works. We could never get enough. It's a disease of more.
It is. It is. And was there ever a fear in you that there could be a transference, or that, if you were to let go of the alcohol, then you would become addicted to something else? Because I know this fear is sometimes present with people that are going through that recovery from a substance addiction. Is that something that was ever present in your mind?
No, I didn't have that fear at the time. Having said that, I think if one has an addictive personality, it can be transferred to something else. But I so wanted to not drink. I wasn't worried about what might happen next.
Mm.
Um, but I have seen in folks that sometimes, some other addictive behavior, even something that could be healthy, like exercise, can become maybe even an unhealthy, addiction. Um, but for me, I just wanted to be at a different place in my relationship to alcohol.
Mm. And what do you think about folks that actually use alcohol as a crutch to work, but don't necessarily realize the consequence in terms of their performance? So at this point, I'm not even thinking about the person that drinks in the morning before work. I'm thinking about the person that heavy drinks the night before a really important meeting. We know scientifically that that level of drinking the night before a peak performance day is going to affect your sleep quality, your whole body and physiology. Do you think we just deny that, we ignore it, or did you get accustomed to not feeling great? Because I just wonder, if you were drinking a lot, did you feel good, or you
No,
just
no,
okay?
heck no. No, I woke up every morning, almost every single day at 4 a.m., which is not the time I wanted to wake up. And I look at myself in the mirror, I'd be shaking, I'd be hot, I'd be sweating, my eyes would be bloodshot. And I looked myself in the mirror and said, "You did it again." And I would go to work, and I'm not an expert on physiology, but I felt terrible. I had the shakes, which I now know are from withdrawing from the alcohol.
During the
And
day, you had this
oh,
symptom?
for sure. Oh, for sure.
Right, right.
And it would pass during the day. Um, and I didn't drink in the morning. It would have changed some of those things if I had. It would have taken care of some of those symptoms of withdrawal, that all of which I experienced. And I would get to work. Now, this was in a day um, in the late 80s and early 90s where you didn't have computers and the internet. You didn't even have cell phones. So escaping online to the computer wasn't something we did. But I remember just sitting at my desk, unable to really move forward with my day, unable to be productive and focused and efficient and effective. So I absolutely experienced that. Yes.
And then tell us about life after. How did you feel in terms of your performance, your ability to be present, your ability to work, your ability to enjoy life?
It's really beyond my wildest dreams. I'm was so full of fear back then, and now I don't often feel fear. And when I do, like I've had a couple physical things, and then you worry until you see the next doctor and get the results. But they're normal things to be afraid of. And then at least I know I'm self-aware of it, and I know how to manage it. I know how to change my thoughts. I'm much more present. I used to always live in the past, worried about being found out, worried about the consequences of what I was doing, and worrying about the future, full of fear about everything in the future. I was a trial lawyer, and I used to worry like crazy about, was I going to win or lose the case? And I learned instead in litigation to just focus on my efforts. Um, don't worry about the results. Don't worry about the outcome. Just do it. Just prepare my examinations, prepare my opening, interview the witnesses. I love the process. I love what I do. But that fear of the future was really very powerful. And now I was never said I'm sorry when I was drinking. Everything was your fault. Nothing was my fault. I could persuade everyone around them that they were wrong, not me. I was pretty persuasive. But now I realize when I've done something wrong, the human thing is to say to my wife, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. That's hard for me because when she's annoyed at something I said that I shouldn't have said, it takes me a minute. I have to process it, but I am able today to say, I'm sorry, Brenda. I should have said that. I was wrong. And to make an amend when it's appropriate, to be accountable, to show up, to be present and not stuck in the past and the future.
Do you think in many ways, for many people, alcohol is an escape mechanism?
I think it is for a lot of people. I think it is
Mm.
for a lot of people, yes.
And do you think there is
And I was going to say, it doesn't have to be that way. There are other things you can, quote, escape into that are much better for you. You could escape into watching your son's soccer game. You could escape into taking a walk with your spouse hand in hand and enjoying the sun and the warm breeze. They can all be, you could escape into riding the Peloton. I like riding the Peloton. It's a great way to burn off stress. It's so powerful and so intense. There are a lot of ways we can relieve that stress. They're much healthier for us than drinking, and one will find more fun and enjoyable than drinking, because drinking for me at the end never relieved anything. It just made the stress and fear worse, not better.
Because I think what's important to hear and is reassuring as well for folks that consider changing their relationship with alcohol is that you can have other outlets, right? That's not the only outlet available. And not only that, that you will have access to many more outlets. What I'm thinking of is no one, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, feels really optimal to go and work out when they're hungover. Or at least in my experience, I really can't work out when I'm hungover. Like, this is just, I can't, right? So I know that whenever I perform or whenever I have a run plan or if I have a race, I actually make sure that I don't drink for a few weeks before that race or that event. I would like to believe that I have quite a healthy relationship with alcohol and I drink moderately but regularly, but not during my race period training because I know that it affects my performance because it affects my sleep. So I cycle in and out of periods where I would just simply have no drinks because I'm preparing for a race. And it feels very healthy actually to have those period of high focus and to be very intentional about it. I was just wondering if you had any thoughts around cycling in and out, maybe for somebody that is not quite in that addiction phase, but does want to scale down? Do you have any thoughts on having periods where you don't drink? Maybe just not drinking for the summer or not drinking for a month. Can that be a nice way to pace it down?
I think it can be. I think for many people that's very healthy and helpful, and to be able to manage it and not drink when you want to, like for you preparing for a marathon, is wonderful. I didn't have that ability. That
Right.
was not something I could do. It's not something that an addict could do. And a couple things I'd like to share for those who are listening. I felt so alone when I was drinking. I felt there was no one like me in the world. I was embarrassed and ashamed. And it's important to know that there are a world of people like you, that you're not the only one, even if you feel like you're drinking alone and secretly, and that there's always a solution. And I felt, and I've talked about that place where I couldn't imagine my life either drinking or not drinking, but there is always a solution. And there are always people willing to help, whether it's a lure assistance program or your EAP office. And the only thing is your willingness to make a choice. Do I want to have a different life? And if so, then reach out to those sources of help. Reach out to the Lure Assistance Program or someone in your firm who's in charge of wellness, and speak to them in confidence and see what resources are available. Because if you're willing, you really can have a life beyond your wildest dreams.
And you do believe you need external help, right? This is hard to
Yeah. Oh,
do.
yes. Oh, yes.
Mm.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's really having that moment of realization and that brutal honesty to actually assess and audit the behavior and come to the conclusion that, yes, this needs to change, right?
Right.
And what about our loved ones? What about somebody listening to this episode today who has a healthy relationship with alcohol, but is married to someone who doesn't? What about them? What can they do? Because, at least in my experience, and I'll defer to yours as you have so much more than I do, helping so many folks combat this addiction, I know that typically if your wife or your husband tells you not to drink, that really pisses you off.
Yeah, I would say there are both approaches which are entirely normal and human that don't work are to try to control your partner's drinking or tell him or her not to drink. Doesn't work. Counterproductive. Or to enable their drinking, to excuse it to the boss at work, to cover up the consequences of the drinking. That doesn't work either. Both enabling and controlling don't work. So what's left? Letting it happen, letting it progress, terribly hard, terribly difficult, letting the drinking partner suffer whatever consequences of their drinking come with it. Because those are the kind of things that, for me, I describe what my final straw was. There may be a final straw for your partner that he or she needs to experience. And take care of yourself. Find someone to talk to who can support you, because there are folks who can support someone who's struggling with an alcoholic in their family, and reach out to them for help and guidance. Because everything we want to do that seems normal and right, telling the person not to drink or calling the boss and saying, oh, they're under the weather today, they don't help. And they're normal reactions. It's kind of against our normal love for our partner to just let them absorb the consequences of their own drinking without our trying to lift them or control them.
Yes. And is there a point where a person should stage an intervention? Is there a point where you think if someone hasn't shown the willingness to get the help they need, is there a point where an intervention might be needed?
Interventions can work and do work sometimes, but I think for the person who's with the alcoholic, I think the main thought is live your life the way you want to. How much do you want to absorb? How many chances do you want to let your partner have? And take care of yourself first, whatever that looks like. And that may mean staying and waiting it out. It may mean I can't do this anymore, but make those choices. But my suggestion is the first thing is reach out to someone for support with what you're going through. Going through it alone is, and just like I said with the alcohol, remember, you're never alone. There are many other people suffering the same thing you do. There are always solutions, and there are always people willing to help.
What I would love for you to do with me, Gary, is I would like to run you through a couple of, just very simple scenario, and for you to tell me if, in your experience, this pattern is a red flag or not. How does that sound? Just very simple case scenario.
Okay, let it roll.
So, for instance, we're going to keep John. John, for many, many years, although he drank quite a lot, we said he drank nearly every night, always drank in good company, right? So either with his colleagues, friends, or his spouse, and he liked to drink in a social context. At the restaurant, he would order the finest wines, etc. But recently, John started to drink when he's on his own. So, long travels, isolated in his hotel room. It's not social. He's not celebrating anything. It's not a nice restaurant. It's not a nice experience. He's just literally just going down to the corner shop and getting the one he can so that he can drink it on his own in his hotel room before falling asleep. Red flag?
Maybe, but not necessarily.
Okay.
I mean, there are people who are single and they can drink at home alone. They may come home from work and have a drink or two. So that's why I say maybe, because I think that in itself would not necessarily be a red flag. The difference might be if John said, well, I had too much to drink last night when he's out of town on a business meeting. I'm not going to drink tonight. I don't want to drink tonight. And he did. That would be the red flag. But if you're out of town and you're by yourself and you want to have a drink or two, that's not in itself, to me, a red flag. And of course, I'm no expert on addiction. I'm just sharing my human experience.
It's really interesting to hear those, because I think those are common concerns, right? Where you think, ooh, I'm starting to sleep, am I? It's just interesting to know that. Okay. Last one? Can we do one more?
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
Okay. Just another one. So maybe this time we turn to Caroline. And she is quite a sophisticated lady, very professional, very successful, and she has very delicate and acquired taste around the kind of drinks that she indulges in. She does drink quite a lot and quite often, but only the finest things. But recently, Caroline's stress really escalated, and she found herself saying yes to alcohol she would have never considered before, things she doesn't like, not her drink of choice, just because she wanted to feel that feeling. And she used to drink a couple glasses, and now she's easily finishing a bottle. Red flag? Okay.
Yeah, I'd say that's a red flag. Now, again, that doesn't mean that Caroline's an alcoholic, but it's a red flag. And it would be an indication to Caroline that maybe this is something I want to think about or talk to somebody about. I mean, there are addiction counselors that she could talk to kind of review her drinking pattern and see if it's a problem. And I think it comes down to if she wants to stop that pattern and is able to, well, then it ceases being a red flag. But if she wants to stop that pattern and is unable to, then it becomes a more powerful indication.
Thank you, Gary. That was really useful. What I really admire about your journey, not only your candor, but also your perseverance and mental resilience, is the fact that you seem to have forged an incredibly strong mindset. And the question I have for you is, did you get that mindset first and combated the addiction after? Or did you combat the addiction first and forge the mindset after? What was the sequence?
Grow through the addiction into recovery, and then the mindset came. My mindset is entirely different than what it was when I was drinking. I'm more full of optimism and faith than I am with fear. I'm pretty chill. I seldom get angry.
Were you angry before, and were you not
not terribly so, but much more so.
Angrier.
And particularly feelings of anger inside. I let other people bother me a lot. You know, if I knew you, Charlene, in some way you weren't living your life the way I wanted to. My mentor and boss, I put boss in air quotes because our relationship was an amazing man. He was a great trial lawyer, a kind, generous, gentle man, but yet he had certain traits about him that I didn't like. And I would hyper focus on them, even though as a human, he was simply incredible. And I was very judgmental. I was controlling, but in a very nice way. I wouldn't be loud and argumentative, but I like, you know, Charlene, maybe if you did this, that circumstance in your life would get better. Like your life is any of my problem. It's not. And now I've learned to focus on me, to let others live their life as they choose. Um, I never judge. Well, I never say never. I try to not judge people. It was a big thing in my life. Before I judged everyone I knew. Now I don't. Everybody has their own journey, and I had a lot I could have been judged for. So my whole mindset is mirror image of what it was before.
And Gary, if you could step into the past and if you could have a conversation with the version of you that was about to drink to the point of blacking out on that particular day that you've mentioned, what would you say to him?
Is this the life that you want? Do you want something different? Do you want to keep feeling this way? Because it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way. There's an answer. There's a solution. You're not the only person who's ever gone through this. And there are people out there who will help you. There are experts and sources of support that can help you grow to live a life beyond your wildest dreams, if that's what you want and if you're willing to give that a try.
Do you think it's important to believe it's possible, right? To make it happen before it does?
Just need to be willing to believe.
Willing to believe. I like that. I like that. And is it important to want something else, something instead? So what I mean by that is instead of focusing on wanting to stop drinking, is it helpful to want to have that kind of life, what life without alcohol could look like, right? Sometimes we say in psychology, it's more helpful to focus on what you want than focusing on what you no longer want to continue doing. What do you think about that?
No, I think that's a great way of looking at it, to think about what you want your life to look like, what you want to move to instead of running away from, I think is a
Exactly.
good way of thinking of it. I don't know that I was thinking of that, actually. I was just thinking of I wanted this to stop. I wanted the pain to stop. But I think that's probably a real good way. And part of it is I didn't have a vision of what my life became or what it could be. I didn't have that vision. And if I could have, I think it would be helpful. And I think that's where talking to someone on the outside can be really helpful, because they can help you see what your life can be like when you get past whatever addiction you might be struggling with.
Thank you, Gary. If somebody is listening to you right now and still struggling to open up or to take that first step to get help, what would you like them to know?
You can have a life that is so beautiful and that you deserve. You know, for me, my addiction was a prison. I was trapped. I was stuck. The key to that gate has been unlocked, and I'm free of that addiction. And I really have a life now that I'm full of gratitude. I'm present. I'm mindful. I'm happy. There are circumstances in my life right now that are incredibly challenging, but I handle them well because I'm not so fixated on changing the reality, resisting those circumstances. I practice a lot of acceptance, and your life can be really, really wonderful if that's what you want. And you just need to be willing. And maybe I've said that too many times, so that's really the key. Be willing to be open to making a different choice.
And what are the tools and strategy that you can offer folks that are listening and would love to get your guidance and expertise with that journey?
I'm not an expert in addiction and recovery, but there are many people who are. I did chair the Lawyer Assistance Program in Maryland, and we would offer support to those who wanted to recover, whether it's from a mental health condition like depression or from an addiction. But we also had two employed therapists. One was addiction counselor, one was a mental health therapist, who were the true experts who would guide that person through their recovery. And I think those are the true experts that someone should reach out to initially, because they can provide the right expert direction of where to go from there.
Yes, therapy is key for addiction, and clinical hypnotherapy also really helps with addiction. It's how I recovered from insomnia and workaholism. So I found it so powerful that I decided to use it for my clients.
Very good. That's awesome. That's awesome.
Gary, thank you. Where would you like our listener to reach out to you, and how do they get to know about all the amazing work that you do?
Thank you. They can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm very active there on a daily basis under my name, Gary Miles, Miles. I also have a website, garymiles.net, where they can find my book, which is called Breaking Free. I talk about the 12 prisons of the mind, such things as people-pleasing, perfectionism, both of which I struggled with, comparison, expectations, things like that, and 12 keys to unlock the prison, some of which I know you focus on: mindfulness, acceptance, gratitude. And my podcast, The Free Lawyer, can be a source. But if they want to reach out to me, they can reach out to me through my website or email me at gary@garymiles.net.
And I would really recommend for you to check out Gary's podcast and to check out the episode that we've done together on your podcast.
Yeah, Charlene was a guest on my podcast, The Free Lawyer, and powerful episode. She shares so much. And for you who regularly listen to her podcast, you know, but what an expert she is in burnout and how to really overcome that and manage it. So check out her episode on The Free Lawyer.
I appreciate you, Gary, and thank you so much for a really enlightening conversation. And once again, thank you so much for sharing and for giving us an insight into your incredible life story. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Charlene. I appreciate it.
Take care.
Thank you for spending your time with me today and listening to this episode. Remember to subscribe so that you can receive weekly updates. And if today's message resonated with you, please remember to share it with a friend, a colleague, or a loved one who could really benefit from this episode.